Psychology underpins everything that we do. It shapes the way we think, the way we experience the world, the way we make decisions, and the way we relate to others. When things start to go wrong and we feel bad, clinical psychology and psychotherapy can help. But the truth is, we don't have to hit rock bottom to benefit from psychological insights. The same principles that help people cope with unimaginable tragedies can help us with our more everyday challenges. In the last couple of decades, the focus of psychology has moved away from addressing problems to an exploration of how we can thrive. The positive psychology movement inspired by Martin Seligman invites us to consider not just what is wrong but how we can build on our strengths. This approach is grounded in the belief that everyone is capable of growth and improvement, an idea championed by psychologists like Carl Rogers. Mental health issues exist on a spectrum, and we all experience moments of distress, from the occasional bout of sadness or worry to more serious conditions like depression or anxiety. But many of the tools that therapists use to help people with specific mental health problems can be useful in everyday life too. As a matter of fact, many of the strategies shared in therapy can be helpful even when we're not struggling with a major crisis. This book reflects many years of learning and practice in the field of clinical psychology. It is based on a simple belief: the very same psychological principles that prove to be powerful tools in the therapist's consulting room are relevant to daily life outside. Each chapter will lead you through personal explorations in which cutting-edge, research-based therapeutic ideas can help you handle common and, at times overwhelming, problems better. These are not random concepts, but rather based on quite sound theories and techniques that have enjoyed practical application for many years. Much of the ideas is from cognitive behavioral therapy, but you will also learn about narrative therapy, solution-focused therapy, and family therapy. The book works through the year, month by month, each chapter exploring the different theme or psychological concept that often comes up in that time of the year. For example, January does New Year's resolutions and the struggle to keep them. February perhaps makes you feel stuck, especially if those January goals hit the skids already. By March, we're thinking about cleaning up and spaces we inhabit, and in April, the impact of our inner voice and how we talk to ourselves. As the year progresses, we'll dive into topics like improving communication and relationships in May, managing social anxiety in June, and coping with existential dread in July. August brings the heat, making us more irritable, and September is a time for reflecting on work-life balance. As the seasons shift, we also address deeper emotional challenges like grief in October and the importance of rest and sleep in November. Finally, December brings a focus on family relationships, expectations, and navigating the pressures of the holiday season. The epilogue ties it all together, reinforcing how the cycle of the year isn't the only rhythm we experience. Life is full of cycles, and reflecting upon these cycles helps us grow. Anniversaries, birthdays, and even the changing of the seasons invite us to pause, reflect, and reconsider where we are. This book will teach you the ways of using the rhythmical work of the inner psychological mechanisms to your best benefit, in order to advance your daily life and strengthen your emotional well-being. This book is meant to be a practical guide, filled with ideas you can use in your own life. It's not a substitute for professional therapy, but it offers tools and insights that can help you navigate the ups and downs of everyday life. Whether you're looking to make positive changes or just get through tough times, these psychological tools can be a valuable companion on your journey. January. Which way next? Decisions, making changes, and sticking to them. January carries this silent burden of reinvention. It's a month when the past weighs and the future looms large. For many, it means the ritual of New Year's resolutions, a tradition as old as the Romans, promising their god Janus they'd begin anew. Change, though, isn't quite so simple as the turning of a calendar page. True change requires something more than just bold declarations. It requires action and patience with ourselves. The new year affords a peculiar psychological opportunity, the fresh start effect. That's why so many of us are seized by the inspiration to tackle big goals on January 1st. But these grand ambitions can backfire if they're too vague or overwhelming. Instead of focusing on some general new you, specific, manageable goals are more effective. Setting SMART, as in specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-limited goals, provides a framework for sustainable change. For instance, it is far easier to commit to a single action, such as booking a driving lesson, than it is to the vague resolution to be more adventurous. But before resolutions, come decisions, and decision-making can be crippling. There's an inherent discomfort in not knowing how things will turn out, and that uncertainty often stops us in our tracks. Sleepless nights, endless pro-con lists, and even flipping a coin won't bring clarity. It isn't the choice alone that's problematic, but rather the weight of imagining a future that is not predictable. Uncertainty makes us anxious, and anxiety muddles the capability of thinking clearly. The search into generalized anxiety disorder showed how the fear of not knowing can trap people into thinking too much. This analysis paralysis often feels impossible to be shaken off, but there lies the acknowledgement that uncertainty happens in life. Not negating doubt, but learning to live with it. One way to untangle decision-making is by anchoring it in values. Rather than trying to predict which option will yield the best outcome, ask yourself what is most important to you right now. Creativity, adventure, and connection would be guiding lights for you. Even then, there might be no perfect answer, but shifting your focus from the unknown future to the values you wanted to honor would make the decision feel more grounded. The journey does not end at decision-making. Sticking to the change is in itself a challenge. The big life adjustments, much like habits, are not overnight miracles. This whole concept of decision fatigue does justify that sticking to the resolution gets tougher as the day wears on. Throughout the day, we all make lots of choices, and with each passing moment our will gets depleted. That's the reason planning ahead removes decisions from the moment. But what happens when we fall off? Motivation isn't always linear, there are setbacks along any path. Falling off the wagon doesn't mean failure, it's an opportunity to reevaluate and recommit. Reflecting on what's working, and what isn't, helps us refine our approach. It's also a reminder to be kind to ourselves. Change isn't a one-time event, it's a continuous practice. January is not about the New Year's resolution or to hail the change. It beckons one inside, into reflection on what really counts. It is about upholding those cycles of trying and stumbling, while believing the process of becoming larger contains even the tiniest decisions. February, inching forwards. Getting going when we feel stuck. February is one of those months that seems like it drags on, especially within the grey, damp chill of the UK. It's a time when the initial excitement of New Year's resolutions has often fizzled, leaving the heavier task of perseverance in its wake. The darkness and cold sap your motivation, and even small steps can feel monumental. This chapter explores what it means to move forward when you feel stuck, be it by circumstance or mood. It is not always as drastic as depression, but it does share some characteristics. Depression itself can be an overwhelming foggy trap where even basic tasks feel impossible. Many describe it as being disconnected from the world, isolated behind glass. For those experiencing this, even seemingly simple actions like getting out of bed or stepping outside can feel insurmountable. One concept that helps explain this is learned helplessness, a term coined by psychologist Martin Seligman. In his research, animals subjected to uncontrollable situations, trying to escape, even when escape became possible. The parallels to depression are striking. The sense of hopelessness feeds itself, making it hard to believe in the possibility of change. Behavioral activation is one psychological way out. It's rooted in the idea that action, even tiny steps, can create a positive ripple effect. When life feels stuck, the key isn't waiting for motivation to appear but actively cultivating it through deliberate, manageable actions. Take Maya for instance. A fresh graduate, she can't seem to get into her life rhythm after university. Whereas her friends seemingly took part-time jobs and socialized without any effort, she found herself crippled with anxiety and a low self-confidence level. Mornings were the worst, waking up late, not wanting to face flatmates, then oversleeping, with her eventually falling into negative self-talk. The therapist helps Maya to clarify what is important for her, such as relationships, creativity, and nature. These values are used as a guide to get her started. She doesn't set any big goals for herself but starts with the tiny act of opening her window to look out into the garden. This gradually escalates to taking her tea outside, eventually growing into small, reinforcing patterns of action. Behavioral activation thrives on small wins. It is not about turning life around in one night but disrupting the negative cycles in a gentle manner. Once Maya goes out, she will have that faint feeling of accomplishment, which then makes her take another small step, like showering or greeting her flatmates. Every small action builds momentum, creating a virtuous cycle of growth. It also includes being more aware and savoring moments of delight and accomplishment, no matter how small. This can be in the warmth of a cup of tea in hand, the sound of birds in the morning, or satisfaction after completing a task. These acts shift the focus away from the heaviness of feeling stuck to the small joys that make each day bearable. It also speaks to balance. As much as practices of gratitude are so lauded, it feels like a kind of dismissal if someone is in emotional pain. Instead, pride or pleasure feels more within reach. And yes, studies have indeed found that monitoring and planning activities providing mastery or enjoyment markedly improves mood. There's also an understanding that, for the most part, progress itself is not rewarding. Depression in particular can really blunt feelings of joy, making it easy to think, why bother? The chapter emphasizes persistence. Even if the first attempt doesn't bring happiness, the act of trying creates opportunities for future success. For those feeling stuck, the smallest actions can carry profound weight. February, with its slow pace and often dreary days, is a reminder that movement, any movement, matters. A step forward doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes it's as simple as getting out of bed, making tea, or taking a deep breath outside. March, spring cleaning. Creating spaces that help us to feel better. March is that transitional month. When days begin to lengthen, the air will perhaps hold just a hint of warmth in it and a feeling of renewal. It is through this natural rhythm of spring that encourages us to make room for something new by cleaning out the old. The space we live in, our homes, workplaces, and even open spaces, plays a significant role in our feelings. Studies conducted in hospitals reveal that patients tend to recover faster when they have something close to nature. Similarly, an urban environment filled with greenery reduces stress, while cluttered, chaotic spaces amplify it. March, with its association with spring cleaning, is an ideal time to reflect on how our surroundings affect us and to take steps toward creating spaces that nurture rather than drain us. Spring cleaning isn't just cleaning. It's about being deliberate with the things and structures in our lives. While hoarding is an extreme behavior, many of us hold on to items out of fear of letting go, sentimental attachment, or simply habit. These objects can create a sense of overwhelm, reminding us of unfinished tasks or past versions of ourselves we're reluctant to release. Decluttering doesn't have to mean getting rid of everything. It's a question of finding a balance, holding on to what is important and letting go of what no longer serves us. The process may be overwhelming, but it becomes quite doable when broken down into small, manageable steps. One approach is to organize items by category, or by location, rather than trying to work on an entire room at once. Take the time to clean out your closet. Sorting through clothes isn't just about space, it is about the stories we tell ourselves. That unworn jacket might represent an aspirational you that never quite materialized, while that threadbare sweater might have comforting memories of simpler times. What stays and what goes becomes, at times, a very emotional exercise, one that is forced on somebody into some interaction with identity and values. Beyond the physical, March invites us to reflect on the emotional and social environments we create. Is there clutter in the mental space of relationships or patterns that no longer serve? What ways might you support creating more boundaries, letting go of the old patterns no longer serving who you would like to be? It makes sure to show that in clearing space, whether physical, emotional, or social, it is never about the act of removal in itself, but about making space for what counts. Once we have freed ourselves from the weights, space for new experiences, ideas, and connections can flow in. This isn't a call for perfection, though. Life is messy, inherently, and trying to live some idealized version of order creates its own stress. The goal is to find what works for you, spaces that feel inviting, objects that bring joy or utility, and relationships that offer mutual support. March, with its themes of growth and renewal, reminds us that transformation often begins with small, deliberate actions. Whether it's clearing out a single drawer, planting flowers in a neglected garden, or setting a boundary in a challenging relationship, each step creates momentum for change. April. Nourishing to flourish. How to stop having a go at ourselves. April awakens life again unto the world. The days grow warmer, blossoms bloom, and the air carries a sense of renewal. It's a time when the world around us seems to flourish, making it the perfect moment to reflect on how we nurture ourselves and create the conditions for our own growth. Just as plants need sunlight, water, and nutrients, we too require care and attention, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Perhaps the most powerful yet poorly tapped methods through which we nourish ourselves include how we talk with ourselves. Inner conversations determine the way in which the world is perceived, and indeed the most important, their impression of themselves. The more self-conversing operates through quick and unconscious acts and may often be unspoken and hidden. The majority are often much crueler to themselves than one realizes. The words "I'm so stupid" or "why can't I get anything right," which may slip out when we are frustrated, hold within them a deeply set pattern of criticism. Often, it is not a voice belonging to us but one molded from the sum of our experiences, relationships, and environments. The child who grew up with heavy judgment for making mistakes may internalize such judgments, and in time they became part of his or her inner narrative. While this critical voice once perhaps protected us from the event of a mistake or sought approval, it often destroys and holds us back instead of helping us grow. The first step in changing this narrative is awareness. Simply noticing how we speak to ourselves can be transformative. Ask yourself, would I speak this way to someone I love? Imagine how different it would feel if that inner voice, instead of criticizing, offered encouragement and kindness. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but with practice, it can lead to profound changes in how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. Psychological approaches, such as CBT, have given ways to question negative self-talk. For example, if you find yourself thinking, "I always mess things up," stop and question that thought. Is that really true? Can you find evidence to the contrary? Reflection upon times of success or moments of resilience might help balance out the negativity. Another potent practice is that of self-compassion, which provides a method with which to replace judgment with kindness. Psychologist Kristen Neff defines 3 components of self-compassion: treating ourselves with kindness rather than judgment, recognizing that the experience of having difficulties is part of the human shared experience, and staying mindful when confronted with painful thoughts and feelings in order not to be carried away by them. One exercise is to externalize the critical voice. Imagine it as a well-meaning but overly stern advisor. Thank it for its input, and then gently nudge yourself toward a more compassionate perspective. Our inner dialogue is also linked with the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Those can change in relation to mood. When you are confident, on a good day, it might feel like some challenge really shows how tough you can be. The same challenge when you're down would feel evidence of your failure. Realizing that we have choices about how to frame these stories is, itself, an act of freedom. A setback can become a lesson in persistence, an awkward encounter a step toward bravery. Narrative therapy builds on this idea, encouraging us to examine the patterns in our self-talk and rewrite the stories we tell ourselves. This doesn't mean ignoring struggles or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it's about finding the threads of growth and possibility even in challenging moments. It's the gentle, painstaking process of blossoming, like the trees in April. It means creating the conditions within which growth can take place, step by step. The small things make all the difference: questioning a negative thought, speaking kindly to yourself, or celebrating a small win. And with time, these efforts will add up, just as the unseen work of many months of winter dormancy brings a spring flower to bloom. May. The art of talking and listening. Using therapy skills to improve conversations. May arrives with the warmth of spring transitioning into summer. The days grow longer, the air lighter, and there's a pull toward connection, toward stepping out of winter's cocoon and engaging more fully with others. Communication is at the heart of how we connect to one another, yet this is generally an area a lot of us struggle with, whether it is the awkward small talk in a party, trying to work out issues in a relationship, or just not being heard in a meeting. Many times conversations can be filled with challenges. In essence, effective communication is the process whereby one understands and is understood, but it requires some skill and intention. Therapeutic training places a heavy emphasis on listening, something that's often taken for granted in daily life. In therapy, the undivided attention given to a client is a cornerstone of the process. Imagine how different our everyday conversations might feel if we brought even a fraction of that focus to them. Perhaps the most simple, yet most powerful thing we can do in life is to be present in a conversation. We have become increasingly prone to multitasking in our conversations, scrolling through our phones, allowing our minds to wander while someone is speaking. Giving a person your full attention sends an unequivocal message: you matter. And that presence creates space where real connection can happen. The physical arrangement of a conversation can also play a role. In therapy, careful attention is paid to details like chair placement to ensure comfort without intensity. In everyday life, being mindful of the setting, a walk outdoors, a quiet moment in the car, can make conversations feel less intimidating and more natural. Open questioning and active listening are examples of other therapeutic skills that could revolutionize the way we speak and listen. Open questions, such as "how did that make you feel?" or "what's been on your mind lately?" encourage expansive, meaningful responses from others. Active listening involves repeating back what you've heard, not verbatim, but in a way that reflects understanding. This simple act of acknowledgement helps people feel heard and often encourages them to open up further. There's something very powerful in the use of space in conversations. Silences are awkward, yet they allow for the processing of thoughts and emotions from both parties involved. Where there might be doubt, giving them space for reflection will allow your conversation to flow into much deeper understandings and richer dialogues. Not every conversation goes swimmingly. Conflict is inevitable in any relationship, but it doesn't have to be destructive. Learning to argue constructively can turn disagreements into opportunities for growth. That means owning your feelings with I statements, such as "I feel frustrated when," rather than placing blame. And try not to move to solutions before understanding the other person's perspective. Criticism and compliments also tend to be difficult to digest. Compliment reflexes that dismiss the comment, and defenses in the face of criticism are very normal yet changeable by practice. Instead, one may learn to simply say thank you to a compliment and in calmness process the feedback for healthier communication. In today's digital age, communication happens across various platforms, and each offers unique advantages. A heartfelt message might come through more clearly in writing, while a deep conversation might flow more naturally during a walk or car ride. Experimenting with different mediums can help us find the right fit for different contexts and relationships. Body language is equally important. Sometimes, what is left unsaid speaks volumes. A tapping foot or crossed arms may indicate restlessness or defensiveness, but don't jump to conclusions. Instead, ask softly, "Is there something on your mind?" and the door for clarity is opened. This chapter reminds us of the gift we give to others, and ourselves, by really listening. In providing space for the expression of another, we encourage connection, empathy, and understanding. Whether through casual chatting with a friend, the tough talk with a partner, or an emotionally charged moment with a loved one, the principles of talking and listening can transcend relationships. May's warmth and light invite us to reach out in a season of connecting. Intention and presence brought to conversation will bring about depth in the connection, which, in turn, nourishes life's fabric. June. Summer socializing. Feeling connected. June brings us long days and warm evenings that beg us to go outside and be with other people. But socially speaking, this is not just enjoyment, it's deeply connected to one's identity and sense of belonging. Humans are wired for connection. Since the earliest days of our species, survival depended on working together in groups. And even though the threats we face today are rather different, the need to feel part of something greater does remain. Of course, it is not always easy being with others. Social anxiety, misunderstandings, and unresolved tensions can make interactions feel fraught. For some, the prospect of a party or gathering stirs excitement, for others, it's a source of dread. But learning to navigate these dynamics is worth the effort. Relationships, in their best form, bring joy, support, and meaning to our lives. Many of our social patterns are a product of early experiences. The person who grew up in an environment where vulnerability was criticized or met with indifference will approach relationships with caution so as not to be rejected or judged. These patterns protect us as children but limit us as adults. The key to change lies in the recognition of such dynamics. For example, Tom develops a sense of dread in anticipation of any social event. He is so convinced that other people will find him boring or awkward, something deeply rooted in his memories of being teased at school. Subsequently, he does not attend gatherings, which in turn strengthens his isolation. Tom gradually starts to unravel these experiences in therapy and, over time, works at challenging the story that he is inherently unlikable. With time, he started attending small, low-pressure events, and that was where he found times of true connection that resealed his confidence. Social anxiety for the most part starts with a fear of being judged. We envision all those worst-case scenarios, our fumbling over words, laughter at our expense, or saying something wrong. Ironically, most others are too caught up with themselves to focus on all those things we perceive ourselves to be flawed with. One effective strategy for managing this anxiety is to shift the focus outward. Rather than fixate on how we're coming across, we can focus on the other person, what they're saying, what they might be feeling, or what we can learn from them. This shift not only eases self-consciousness but also deepens the quality of our interactions. Gradual exposure is another potent tool. For Tom, that means starting with a small coffee meeting with a close friend and then gradually progressing to larger gatherings. The narrative of each new successful interaction can be added into an ever-evolving, more empowering narrative to battle the belief that socializing is inherently risky. Even the best relationships have misunderstandings. An influence of expectations, assumptions, and states of emotions causes misunderstandings in communication. During such times, too often our urge is to defend ourselves or retreat when what understandings call for is just the opposite: curiosity and openness. Active listening is a key skill here. This means fully concentrating on what the other person is saying without planning your response or interrupting. Phrases like "Can you tell me more about that?" can clarify intentions and reduce the likelihood of misinterpretation. It is also important to note that not all misunderstandings need to be sorted out immediately. Sometimes, when the emotions have settled, revisiting will be more productive. June, with its barbecues, weddings, and events outdoors, provides a real opportunity to seize the day. For some, that might be taking up an invitation they'd normally decline because it takes them out of their comfort zone. For others, that may mean creating spaces literally or metaphorically in which connection feels safe and authentic. As the month wears on, long evenings and bright skies beckon us to step into the light, both physically and socially. It might be time to reconnect with that old friend, attend that community event, or simply enjoy a conversation over coffee. June invites us to deepen our connections and celebrate the bonds that enrich our lives. July. 3 a.m. worries. Coping with uncertainty and existential angst. July brings long, warm days but has a peculiar way of heightening certain anxieties. It might be the oppressive heat or the quiet stillness of the night, but often this month seems to stir something deeper within us. This chapter explores what it calls 3 a.m. worries, those dark spirals of thought that take hold when the world is quiet and the mind refuses to rest. In the small hours of the night, thoughts that feel negligible during the day can take on a frightening intensity. A casual comment from a colleague or a missed deadline can spiral into a cascade of what ifs. These moments of nocturnal anxiety are not only personal, but also extend to broader existential ones, anxieties about climate change or the ongoing impact of the pandemic. Real or imagined, existential threats have this uncanny ability to unsettle us. The feeling of vulnerability has heightened over recent years, with the COVID pandemic serving as a stark, collective reminder that life is inherently unpredictable. During this time, anxiety levels remarkably rose among frontline workers, vulnerable populations, and people with pre-existing mental health challenges. How that uncertainty can feel so insufferable has been for some time now a point of psychologists' studies on coping. It threatens our safety and makes the present hard to focus on. We constantly seek information to fill the gaps, but this can backfire. Doom scrolling or obsessively checking the news can amplify our worries rather than resolve them. While some level of uncertainty is unavoidable, there are strategies to manage its impact. One approach is to separate what's within our control from what isn't. For example, you can prepare for a presentation, but you can't control how your audience will respond. Accepting this distinction can help redirect energy toward productive actions rather than futile worrying. Grounding techniques also play a crucial role. Some of the simpler ones include paying attention to your breathing, naming objects in a room, or physically sensing any sensations that help anchor this person in the present. This helps disrupt the spiraling thought and refocuses the attention onto what can be sensed to be real. For more persistent worries, limiting your information diet can make a significant difference. Instead of consuming endless updates about global crises, choose a few reliable sources and check them at set intervals. This reduces the emotional overwhelm that comes from constant exposure to distressing news. The term eco-anxiety refers to the deep unease of many people facing the phenomenon of climate change. While that anxiety is based on a real concern, it has become debilitating at some point rather than galvanizing, and the problem has been finding the right balance between awareness and agency. Understand the problem without doing small significant things about it would work. Actions like reducing personal waste, joining environmental groups, or advocating for policy changes can channel eco-anxiety into something constructive. At the same time, it's important to carve out moments of joy and connection to avoid becoming consumed by fear. Ultimately, this chapter emphasizes the importance of self-compassion when dealing with uncertainty. It's easy to be hard on ourselves for not doing enough or for feeling overwhelmed, but treating ourselves with kindness can make the process more bearable. A small act of self-care, like making tea, taking a deep breath, or stepping outside, can be a powerful way to ease the weight of existential worry, even if only by a fraction. Life's uncertainties are inevitable, but they don't have to define us. By grounding ourselves, focusing on what we can control, and extending compassion to ourselves and others, we can navigate these worries with greater resilience. July reminds us that while the dark hours of the night may bring fears, the dawn always follows. August. Hot under the collar. Managing anger. August brings with it the height of summer, often accompanied by hot, sticky days and sleepless nights. The heat can feel relentless, fraying nerves and shortening tempers. This chapter explores the relationship between heat and anger, offering tools to understand and manage this powerful emotion. Anger is often metaphorically represented with the use of heat, cooling down after a fight, hot-headedness, or fuming. These metaphors aren't an accident. Scientists have documented that when it gets hotter outside, people get more aggressive. Studies reviewed by psychologist Craig Anderson found that hotter days, seasons, and regions consistently showed higher rates of violent crimes, including assault and domestic violence. Heat, it seems, doesn't just make us physically uncomfortable, it also stirs something deeper within. But anger itself isn't inherently bad. Like anxiety, it's an emotion that can serve a purpose. At its core, anger signals that something isn't right, an injustice, a boundary crossed, or an unmet need. It can energize us to take action, advocate for ourselves, or demand change. The key lies in how we channel this emotion. Anger can be both destructive and constructive. When it leads to outbursts or is turned inward as self-criticism, it can damage relationships and erode self-esteem. On the other hand, when directed thoughtfully, it can drive positive change. However, this kind of harnessing of anger is not that easy at all. In most circles of marginalized or vulnerable populations, constructive anger would need supportive others for such expressions of the emotion to occur. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming and far from an act but an automatic reaction. Anger is seldom a standalone emotion, it tends always to mask other feelings of sadness, fear, or concern. If we can stop and reflect on what's fueling our anger, we can gain some real insight into our needs and situations. Managing anger starts with awareness. Recognizing when and why we're angry allows us to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Simple practices like naming the emotion can create distance from it, making it easier to handle. Perspective-shifting exercises can also help. Imagine looking at the situation from a future vantage point or as a neutral observer. This approach, often used in dialectical behavior therapy, encourages reflection rather than escalation. Another powerful tool involves breathing techniques. Deep, slow breaths, particularly focusing on a longer exhale, activate the parasympathetic nervous system, helping the body and mind to calm down. Regular mindfulness practices create resilience against the intensity of anger. Mindfulness doesn't eradicate difficult emotions, rather, it gives space to observe without getting swept away. It would appear that a great part of emotional stability depends upon physical well-being, proper hydration, good sleep, and nutrition. These fundamentals tend to increase our threshold of irritation and enhance the capacity for better regulation of overwhelming feelings. And lastly, self-compassion is in order. It's so easy to self-judge when feelings of anger arise, either for feeling or expressing it. This just adds to the emotional weight. Treating ourselves with kindness, acknowledging that anger is a natural, human response helps to break the cycle of frustration and guilt. August, hot and fiery, reminds us more than ever that anger is not good or bad, it's a signal. By listening to what it has to say and responding with care, we can make it a force for understanding and growth. September. That Sunday night feeling. Making the most of work. September carries the unmistakable back-to-school energy, even for those long past their classroom days. There's a sharpness in the air, a sense of preparation, and for many, an undercurrent of dread. This chapter explores the infamous Sunday night feeling, the sinking sensation that the weekend is over and the work week looms ahead, and offers ways to navigate the challenges of modern work life. Work is a big part of life for most people, defining identity and affecting well-being. It's a source of pride, a sense of purpose, but also a source of stress, dissatisfaction, and burnout. The balance between these experiences often hinges on factors within and outside of our control. That Sunday evening dread is familiar to many, a mix of anticipation, anxiety, and reluctance to return to the structured demands of the workplace. While this feeling doesn't necessarily indicate a poor job fit, it often reflects an imbalance between challenge and satisfaction. A role that feels perpetually draining rather than energizing might signal deeper misalignment. Not all Sunday night feelings are bad. Sometimes they arise out of the natural anxiety of tackling something new, a situation that stretches us just outside our comfort zone. But when the heaviness becomes unrelenting, it's worth examining our relationship with work. Worrying about a micromanaging boss or an unchangeable corporate policy can drain energy without resolution. Instead, focusing on aspects we can influence, like setting boundaries or improving our own skills, can foster a sense of agency. It's helpful to picture this difference. Imagine two concentric circles, an inner one representing what you can control and an outer one for what you cannot. Sorting workplace irritants into these categories clarifies where to direct energy. For instance, you can't change a colleague's chronic lateness, but you can choose how you respond, whether by addressing the issue directly or adjusting your expectations. One of the chapter's most practical suggestions is the concept of job crafting, a proactive approach to reshaping a role to align better with your strengths and values. This might involve seeking out tasks that energize you, building connections with colleagues, or creating small rituals that make your day more enjoyable. For example, someone who values creativity might volunteer to design team presentations, while someone who thrives on connection might initiate weekly check-ins with co-workers. These small shifts not only improve satisfaction but also increase resilience against workplace stress. Workplaces often reward perfectionism, but the constant pursuit of flawless performance can be exhausting. This chapter explores how perfectionism creates a cycle of stress and avoidance, where fear of failure prevents people from taking risks or completing tasks. Breaking this cycle involves recognizing when good enough truly is good enough. Mindfulness is one tool for managing perfectionism. By staying present and acknowledging the bigger picture, it becomes easier to release the need for everything to be ideal. This practice also extends to managing workplace stress, whether through breathing exercises, taking regular breaks, or finding moments of calm in the chaos. With the stresses of work, sometimes it is very easy to forget why one started with a particular job in the first place. Reflecting on aspects that bring joy, meaning, or fulfillment, whether it's collaborating with a great team, contributing to a cause, or simply earning a stable income, can help reframe the experience. It may be the time when one needs to ask himself if all this still is in tune with goals and values when positives seem few and far in between. A transition could be much easier if the change is really necessary one, which is towards acknowledging and preparation for new opportunities. September encourages a fresh perspective on work. It's a time to assess what's working, what isn't, and what steps can bring greater balance. Whether it's tweaking small routines, addressing perfectionist tendencies, or planning a bigger career shift, this month is about embracing the possibilities for growth and alignment in the workplace. October. Falling leaves. Coping with loss. October in the UK means a whole world of yellows, reds, and vibrant oranges as the leaves fall, covering the streets and pavements. Yet again, this time of the year ushers in the winter period, with its days getting shorter and nights cold. It is a somber shift that can heighten any feelings of melancholy as the year edges toward its conclusion. Autumn is a stark reminder of the cycles inherent in life. Leaves fall, trees shed their beauty, and we are left with a stripped-down world. This natural transition mirrors the losses we experience throughout life. Whether it's a significant bereavement or a subtler sense of longing for what could have been, loss is unavoidable. It's not something to solve but something to live with. Autumn in many cultures is a time of mortal reflection. For the Celts, the festival of Samhain, usually on October 31st, marked the boundary between this world and the next. Similarly, Mexico's Day of the Dead transforms grief into celebration, with altars and offerings for departed loved ones. These rituals remind us of the human desire to stay connected to those we've lost, keeping their memory alive even as we move forward. Grief isn't a single, uniform emotion, it's a swirling mix of feelings, from sadness to anger to wishful thinking. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's popular theory of the 5 stages of grief provides a framework for understanding these emotions, though it was never meant to be a rigid roadmap. People often move back and forth between stages, and not everyone experiences all of them. Grief takes energy, and generally leaves people exhausted, both bodily and mentally. It may also present itself through forgetfulness, inability to concentrate, or even a headache or body ache. It is not unusual to feel anxious because of grief, and to feel a sense that nothing is safe anymore. One of the ways through grief is to find a way to honor the person or relationship or experience that is lost. This can be anything as simple as talking about them, telling stories, or even keeping mementos. Funerals often serve this purpose, creating a space to conjure the essence of a person, celebrating their life in all its complexities. This can extend to include honoring other types of loss as well, the end of a relationship, the path in a career taken that didn't work out, or perhaps even those roads not taken in life. Taking time to acknowledge these losses, rather than brushing them aside, creates space for healing. Sometimes, grief feels disproportionate to the immediate loss, tapping into unresolved pain from earlier experiences. A breakup, for instance, might stir memories of a childhood loss or an earlier betrayal. These emotional echoes are a reminder of the importance of giving ourselves time and space to process each loss fully. For overwhelming or persistent grief, seeking professional support can make a significant difference. Therapists can help untangle the threads of past and present losses, offering tools to navigate the emotions that arise. The chapter emphasizes that there is no right way to grieve. It's not about doing it gracefully or efficiently, it's about surviving in whatever way you can. Grief doesn't disappear over time but becomes folded into our lives in a more manageable way. Anniversaries, unexpected reminders, or even fleeting moments can bring it rushing back, but with gentleness and self-compassion, these moments can be less overwhelming. October reminds us that with every gain in life, there is a corresponding loss, much like growing up. Holding space for grief and to reconnect might be what gets us through a dark season with a little more light. November. The joy of missing out. Valuing rest. November feels like a moment to pause. The days are shorter, the nights colder, and there's a quiet pull toward stillness. It's a time when the relentless pace of the year seems to slow, and the idea of rest takes center stage. Rest often feels counterintuitive in a culture that trumpets busyness. There's this silent compulsion to do more, achieve more, and be on at every moment. Eventually, this relentless drive gives way to burnout, replete with feelings of physical and emotional depletion. The notion of slowing down for many feels indulgent, even irresponsible. Yet rest is as important as work. It restores our energies, wets our minds, and shields our sanity. Rest is more than sleep. Though sleep is a cornerstone of well-being, there is more to rest than this. To do nothing, to allow ourselves time to daydream, or to indulge in hobbies for their own sake can be profoundly restorative. These moments give our brains an opportunity to process what happened during the day, solidify memories, and reboot for what's next. The chapter introduces the concept of joy of missing out as a gentle alternative to fear of missing out. Instead of chasing every invitation, opportunity, or trend, joy of missing out encourages us to find contentment in staying in, saying no, or simply savoring the moment. The changing light of November also plays a role in how we feel. Research into seasonal affective disorder highlights how the decrease in daylight can affect mood, energy, and motivation. Recognizing our body's rhythms and respecting them can be transformative. In the same way that trees shed their leaves and animals hibernate, we too benefit from periods of rest and reflection. Instead of resisting the pull toward stillness, embracing it can lead to deeper renewal. The word rest carries a lot of guilty feelings for many people. It's easy to feel like we should always be productive, ticking off tasks or meeting obligations. There is Jack, a psychiatrist in training, constantly oscillates between productivity and burnout. He fills his schedule with work, social commitments, and personal projects, only to collapse with exhaustion whenever he gets a break. To counteract guilt, it helps to reframe rest as an active choice rather than a passive indulgence. Rest isn't about giving up, it's about preparing to engage more fully when the time is right. It's an investment in future energy and creativity. The chapter offers practical advice for incorporating more rest into daily life. This might include setting boundaries around work and social obligations or experimenting with activities that promote relaxation, like mindfulness or gentle exercise. Establishing consistent bedtime routines and creating a comfortable sleep environment can improve the quality and quantity of sleep, laying a strong foundation for overall restfulness. December. It's Christmas. Negotiating families and managing expectations. December brings the glint of fairy lights, the smell of mulled wine, and the promise of festive celebrations. Still, beneath the cheer, this month can be overwhelming. Families gather, expectations rise, and the pressure to create the perfect holiday can make even the most joyful moments feel strained. Christmas is a time of high expectation. Films and advertisements paint an idyllic picture of harmony and joy, smiling families gathered around roaring fires, exchanging gifts, and sharing meals. Real life is often very different. Families quarrel, plans go wrong, and the pressure to make it all perfect leads to exhaustion. One of the central ideas in this chapter is the concept of the expectation gap. This is the distance between what we hope for and what actually happens. The greater the gap, the more disappointment we feel. Recognizing this dynamic allows us to adjust our expectations and focus on what really matters: connection, presence, and small moments of joy. Family gatherings can indeed be heartwarming and tense at the same time, with old patterns reappearing and unresolved conflicts festering just below the surface. Preparation makes a big difference. Thinking about what might set off the stressors and thinking about preparing responses can reduce the chances of stress. Radical acceptance, a concept from dialectical behavior therapy, offers a way to cope with challenging dynamics. It involves accepting people and situations as they are, rather than wishing they were different. This doesn't mean condoning bad behavior but rather letting go of the struggle to change what's beyond our control. For example, if a relative tends to dominate conversations, accepting this trait rather than feeling resentful can make interactions less draining. Traditions are a cornerstone of Christmas, but they don't have to be rigid. If certain rituals no longer feel meaningful or manageable, it's okay to adapt or replace them. Similarly, for those grieving a loss, creating new traditions can be a way to honor the past while embracing the present. Lighting a candle, sharing stories, or dedicating a moment of silence can provide comfort and connection. In the hustle and bustle, it is common for self-care to get put on the back burner. But self-care is essential in navigating the ups and downs of December. Both physical care, like getting enough sleep, staying hydrated, and eating balanced meals, and emotional care, such as setting boundaries and carving out time for rest. For some, the thought of stepping out of the festive bubble is invigorating. A quiet walk, a good book, or even a simple cup of tea can provide a much-needed pause. Mindfulness practices, such as focusing on your breath or tuning into the sensations of the present moment, help to anchor you when things seem overwhelming. This chapter encourages us to let go of the perfect Christmas expectation. The best moments in any season are the ones nobody planned: laughter one shares over a burnt turkey, a snowball fight that took place on a whim, or any heartfelt conversation. In embracing imperfection, we make room for authenticity and delight. December, in all its juxtapositions, reminds us to pay attention to what is most important. A time to hold dear our relationships, old and new traditions, finding that glimmer of stillness among chaos. We let this season become meaningful and palatable if we just let flexibility and self-compassion in. As the book concludes, the reflections span the journey through a full year, highlighting life's recurring cycles of growth, challenges, and renewal. Each season brought its unique lessons, weaving a tapestry of experiences that reinforced the importance of resilience, self-compassion, and connection. January introduced the concept of fresh starts and the pressure they can bring. It explored decision-making and change, acknowledging the difficulty of transitions and their accompanying anxiety and loss. Strategies like early decision-making, value-based direction, and self-compassion emerged as tools to manage these moments. Techniques to counter repetitive thinking patterns like worry and rumination were highlighted to sidestep mental spirals. February tackled feelings of being stuck, suggesting action before motivation as a way to break through inertia. Emphasis was placed on savoring small pleasures, taking gradual steps toward goals, and reorienting to personal values to navigate life's direction. Recognizing the harm of comparisons, particularly between personal lows and others' highs, encouraged self-acceptance and pacing. March shifted focus to spring cleaning, not just physically but emotionally. Creating calming spaces by reducing clutter, using natural elements, and balancing comfort with mystery were recommended. A harmonious environment was linked to internal peace, with flexible spaces for both privacy and sociability being ideal. April emphasized self-nourishment and personal growth, encouraging a kinder inner dialogue. The power of reframing critical self-talk and adopting a compassionate tone was explored. Practical techniques to ground oneself in the present moment, check distorted beliefs, and externalize the inner critic offered paths to personal resilience. The chapter also touched on narrative therapy, reinforcing the idea that individuals can shape their stories. In May, the focus turned outward to interpersonal connections. Strategies for meaningful conversations included asking open-ended questions, actively listening, and summarizing to ensure understanding. Building assertiveness, breaking unhelpful patterns in disagreements, and maintaining communication were keys to strengthening relationships. June explored fostering connections during social seasons like weddings and parties. It identified barriers such as social anxiety and past relationship patterns while providing actionable steps like shifting focus outward, addressing misunderstandings directly, and caring for oneself to better engage with others. July delved into existential uncertainty, encouraging acceptance of life's unpredictability. Avoiding excessive information consumption and grounding oneself in daily rituals helped foster a sense of safety. The balance between control and surrender guided constructive action while promoting self-compassion in facing life's challenges. August addressed anger management by understanding its roots and exploring accompanying emotions. Tools like mindfulness, perspective shifts, and physical self-care were offered to manage overwhelming anger. Techniques from dialectical behavior therapy, such as acting opposite to angry impulses and self-soothing, were also presented. September took a practical approach to work-life challenges, including perfectionism and Sunday night dread. It introduced job crafting to align roles with personal values and highlighted daily self-care to manage stress. Mindfulness and celebrating successes were recommended for maintaining balance and navigating potential job transitions. October reflected on grief and loss, recognizing the unique ways individuals mourn and reconnect. Creating personal traditions to honor memories and balancing mourning with reconnect were emphasized. This process helped keep loved ones or significant experiences alive in meaningful ways. In November, the importance of rest was underscored, beyond just sleep. Integrating small moments of rest throughout the day was seen as vital for overall well-being. Viewing rest as an active, intentional practice was key to maintaining balance. December closed with reflections on navigating family dynamics and expectations during the holidays. Managing the gap between idealized visions and reality, planning for what can be controlled, and letting go of unhelpful habits were central themes. Gentleness toward oneself was highlighted as a year-round necessity. Throughout the year, life's repeating patterns and cycles were evident, echoing themes of growth, reflection, and resilience. Navigating life's dualities, mistakes and successes, joy and sorrow, helped cultivate perspective and adaptability. The present moment, rooted in reflection and connection, offered grounding amidst uncertainty. Life's journey remains unpredictable, yet within it lies the opportunity for continued growth and renewal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this book summary, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more summaries. Do you have any thoughts or questions? Drop them in the comments below.